Hi, this is Milbor. Nothing is more rewarding or useful than a well-executed knot, yet the history of ropes and knots is so dim and ancient that really little is known of their origin. The earliest man used cordage of some kind, and by his ingenuity succeeded in tying the material together, is indisputable, for the most ancient carvings and decorations of prehistoric man show knots in several forms. Doubtless that trailing vines and plants first suggested ropes to human beings, and it is quite probable that these same vines and their various twistings and twinings gave men and women their first idea of knots. Since the earliest times, knots have been used everywhere interwoven with human affairs. Jugglers have used them in their tricks. They have become almost a part of many occupations and trades, while in song and story they have become the symbol of steadfastness and strength. Few realize the importance that knots and cordage have played in the world's history, but if it had not been for these simple and everyday things, which as a rule are given far too little consideration, the human race could never have developed to its current extent. Indeed, no cloth could be woven, no net or sign knitted, no bow strung, no craft sailed on lake or sea, without numerous knots and proper lines or ropes, and Columbus himself would have been far more handicapped without the knots than without a compass. History abounds with mention of knots, and in the 8th book of the Odyssey, Ulysses is represented as securing various articles of raiment by a rope fastened in a knot closed with Circassian art. And as further proof of the prominence the ancients gave to knots, the famous Gordian knot may be mentioned. Probably no one will ever learn just how this fabulous knot was tied, and like many modern knots, it was doubtless far easier for Alexander to cut than to untie it. The old sorcerers used knots in various ways, and the witches of Lapland sold sailors so-called wind knots, which were untied by the sailors when they desired a particular wind. Even modern conjurers and wizards use knots extensively in their exhibitions, and upon the accuracy and manner in which their knots are tied depend the success of their tricks. In heraldry, many knots have been used as symbols and badges, and many old coats of arms bear intricate and handsome knots or entwined ropes emblazoned upon them. As to the utility of knots and rope work, there can be no question. A little knowledge of knots has saved many a life in storm and wreck, and if everyone knew how to quickly and securely tie a knot, there would likely be far fewer casualties in hotel and similar fires. In 1,000 ways and times, a knowledge of ropes and knots is useful and may be necessary. Many an accident has occurred through a knot or splice being improperly formed, and even in tying an ordinary bundle or roping a trunk or box, few people tie a knot that is secure and yet readily undone, and quickly made. In a life of travel and adventure and out-of-the-way places, in yachting or boating, in hunting or fishing, and even in motoring, to command a number of good knots and splices is to make life safer, easier, and more enjoyable, aside from the pleasure one may find in learning the interesting art of knot tying. Through countless ages, the various forms of knots and fastenings for rope, cable, or cord have been developed, the best kinds being steadily improved.